Hey guys, you know me. My name is Colton. I intern here at Harvest Time, and this is...
I'm Luke. I'm Colton's roommate. We go to Crown College, and you know that we study youth and family ministry. And I work at Wapaka Victory Church.
Yeah, so today we're going to be looking at a parable in the Bible where Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan. So if you're watching right now, pause the video, flip your Bible open to Luke 10, 25 through 36. That's where we're going to be reading from and looking at. So we'll start right now. So verse 25, and behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, that is Jesus. Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor?
So your neighbor might not look, act, or talk like you. And if you have to ask that question, as the lawyer did, it almost brings off the fact that you're not loving your neighbor as you should.
Right. If we have to justify ourselves in that moment, maybe that's an indicator that we aren't loving well. So reading further on in verse 30, Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers. Some guys beat him up. Who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came down to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Now, Jesus said to him, which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell among robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise.
It's funny that the priest and the Levite both passed him, but the Samaritan, who was considered to be unpure to the other Jewish culture, because of the fact that when the Jews were invaded in Israel and took over by the northern kingdom, they were pushed out and went into exile, whereas some Jews actually stayed back. And those Jews eventually became Samaritans and were end up worshiping idols. So that's why they were considered unpure. And likewise, so this person, the Samaritan that was outcasted by the Jews, was the person who actually helped out the man on the road after he's beaten and given him all the stuff, put oils on him and put him in robes and asked for people to take care of him. That's crazy.
And so considering that it was the Samaritan who showed love to the person that was in need, the person who was robbed and beaten, it kind of convicts me a little bit myself, the question of who is my neighbor? Because I've found myself in the position of the lawyer where I go to Jesus and stand before him and I go, well, Lord, who is my neighbor? You definitely can't mean that weird guy at the end of the street, right? Because he's crazy. You definitely can't mean that old lady that needs help moving stuff upstairs, right? Because that sounds like a lot of work. We tend to shy away from people who are different than us, people who talk differently than we do, act differently than we do. And it's something that we as Christians need to move towards people who are different than us. Because the gospel, Jesus, is not about one people group. Jesus spoke to Samaritans, he spoke to Jews, and ultimately sent the gospel to all 4 corners of the earth, to all people. So we as Christians need to be people who love all people, regardless of if they're different than us. So I want to take this time, I want to ask you guys here at the end of the video, take these questions, take what the lawyer did and ask these questions to yourself. Who is my neighbor? As I said earlier in the video, who is my neighbor? Who, Jesus, am I supposed to love well? And apart from that, after you've asked yourself that question and identified who your neighbor is, ask yourself, am I loving them well? And if I'm not, what can I do differently to ensure that from now on I do love people well?